The Riverside Textile Mill had been closed for 30 years. The machines were silent. The floors were empty. The windows were broken. But the building still stood on the edge of town like a monument to a different era. An era when factories meant jobs. When work meant dignity. When a paycheck was enough to raise a family. On a cold November morning in 2024, someone cut through the fence and walked across the abandoned parking lot. Her name was Gloria Reyes. She was 73 years old. And she was returning to the place where she'd spent 25 years of her life. The place where she'd sewn fabric 12 hours a day. The place where she'd fought for her coworkers. The place where she'd made one decision that had haunted her for 50 years. What Gloria found in that factory wasn't just old machines and dusty floors. It was evidence. Evidence of the chemical exposure that had killed her friends. Evidence the company had hidden. Evidence that proved she'd been right all along. And evidence that could finally bring justice to the women who had trusted her and died because she stayed silent. Stay with me because this is a story about workers who were poisoned. A company that covered it up. And a woman who had one chance to speak up and didn't. Till now. Gloria Reyes started working at Riverside Textile Mill in 1962. She was 17 years old. Fresh out of high school. Her mother had worked there. Her aunts had worked there. It was what women in her neighborhood did. They sewed. They worked the machines. They brought home paychecks that kept their families fed. Gloria was good at her job. Fast. Precise. She could run 3 machines at once. By the time she was 25, she was a floor supervisor. She managed 40 women. He trained new workers. He kept production running smoothly. She was proud of her work. Proud of what she'd built. But there was always something wrong with the factory. The air. It smelled chemical. Like burning plastic mixed with something sweet and rotten. The ventilation didn't work properly. The windows were sealed shut to maintain temperature control for the machines. The air just circulated. Thick. Heavy. Hard to breathe. Workers complained. Headaches. Nausea. Dizziness. Nosebleeds. The company doctor said it was normal. Said all factories smelled bad. Said the workers were being dramatic. Gloria believed him at first. She was young. She trusted authority. She thought if something was really dangerous, someone would stop it. Then the women started getting sick. Really sick. Maria Santos was 32 when she was diagnosed with leukemia. She'd worked at the mill for 8 years. She died 6 months later. Rosa Martinez was 28. Liver cancer. Dead in 4 months. Angela Diaz was 45. Lung cancer. Never smoked a day in her life. Dead in 3 months. Over 5 years, 12 women from the factory were diagnosed with cancer. All young. All previously healthy. All worked in the same section of the factory. Section C. Where they used a new synthetic fabric treatment. Where the chemical smell was strongest. Where Gloria worked. Gloria started asking questions. She talked to other workers. They were scared too. They'd all noticed the pattern. Too many women getting sick. Too many young deaths. But nobody wanted to make waves. Jobs were hard to come by. The mill paid better than anywhere else. If they complained, they might get fired. And then what? How would they feed their families? Gloria understood. But she also knew something was wrong. She went to the floor manager. A man named Robert Hayes. She told him about the cancer cluster. The 12 women. The Section C pattern. Robert listened. Then he told her to drop it. There's no proof it's related to the factory, he said. People get cancer. It's tragic, but it happens. You're seeing patterns where there aren't any. But Gloria couldn't let it go. He contacted OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. She filed a complaint. Anonymously. Said the factory was exposing workers to dangerous chemicals. Said women were dying. Said someone needed to investigate. OSHA sent an inspector. The inspector came on a Tuesday. The factory had been cleaned the day before. The ventilation was turned up high. The windows were opened. The inspector walked through, took some air samples and left. 2 weeks later the report came back. No violations found. Air quality within acceptable limits. No evidence of dangerous exposure. The complaint was closed. Gloria was devastated. How was that possible? She knew what she smelled every day. She knew 12 women were dead. But the official report said everything was fine. And then Robert called Gloria into his office. He knew she'd filed the complaint. He didn't say how he knew, but he knew. And he made her an offer. Gloria, you're a good worker. You have a future here. You could be a plant manager someday. But you need to stop causing trouble. Stop scaring the other workers. Stop filing complaints. If you do, I'll make sure you're taken care of. If you don't, well, I can't protect you. Do you understand? Gloria understood. She had 2 kids at home. A husband who'd been laid off. She needed this job. So she stopped asking questions. She stopped pushing. She kept her head down and worked. And women kept dying. Over the next 10 years, 18 more women were diagnosed with cancer. 18 more deaths. All from Section C. All exposed to the same chemicals. And Gloria said nothing. She watched her friends get sick. Watched them die. Watched their families struggle. And she said nothing. Because she was scared. Because she needed her job. Because she'd been told to be quiet. And because part of her believed maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe the company was right. Maybe she was seeing patterns that weren't there. But she knew. Deep down she knew. And that knowledge ate at her every single day for 30 years until the factory finally closed in 1994. Gloria left the factory in 1994 when it closed. She found other work. Reception. Nothing that paid as well. Nothing that felt as meaningful. But nothing that smelled like chemicals and killed her coworkers either. She tried to move on. To forget. But she couldn't. Every time she saw an obituary for another former mill worker. Every time someone from her old crew died of cancer, the guilt came back. Sharper. Heavier. You could have stopped this. You could have saved them. You chose your job over their lives. And now they're dead. Gloria's husband died 5 years ago. Her kids moved away. She lived alone in the same small house she'd bought with her mill salary in 1975. And lately she'd been thinking about the factory more and more. About the women who died. About the choice she'd made. About Robert Hayes and his threats. About the OSHA report that found nothing wrong when everything was wrong. And then last week Gloria saw something on the news. A class action lawsuit. Former workers from industrial factories suing companies for chemical exposure. Winning. Getting settlements. Getting their medical bills paid. Getting acknowledgement that yes, the company knew. Yes, they covered it up. Yes, they let people die to protect profits. Gloria thought about the women from Section C. 30 women dead over 20 years. All cancer. All young. All exposed to the same chemicals. That wasn't coincidence. That was causation. And somewhere there had to be proof. The company must have known. Must have tested the chemicals. Must have known they were dangerous and used them anyway. And if Gloria could find that proof, maybe she could still help. Maybe she could get justice for the families. Maybe she could do what she should have done 50 years ago. So Gloria made a decision. She would go back to the factory. She would search the offices. She would find evidence. And she would finally speak up. The factory had been abandoned for 30 years. The fence was falling down. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown. The building itself looked like it might collapse. But Gloria cut through the fence with bolt cutters she'd bought at a hardware store. She walked across the parking lot where she used to park every morning for 25 years. And she pushed open the side door that had always stuck unless you lifted while you pushed. It still stuck. Some things never changed. Gloria stepped inside and was hit by a wave of memory so strong she had to stop and breathe. The smell was still there. Faint, but recognizable. That chemical smell. Even after 30 years of being closed, the building still smelled like poison. Gloria walked through the factory floor. The machines were still there. Rusted. Covered in dust. But still there. She found her old station. Machine 47. She'd run that machine for 15 years. He touched it. Cold metal. And she remembered. Maria Santos had worked 3 machines down. Rosa Martinez had been across the aisle. Angela Diaz had been behind her. All dead. All killed by whatever was in the air of this building. Gloria wiped her eyes and kept walking. She needed to find the offices. The records. She climbed the stairs to the second floor where management had worked. The door to Robert Hayes's office was unlocked. Gloria stepped inside. The office was exactly as it had been left. Desk. Filing cabinets. Papers scattered on the floor. Gloria started searching. She went through the desk first. Old memos. Production reports. Nothing useful. Then the filing cabinets. Personnel files. Payroll records. Safety reports. Gloria pulled out the safety reports and started reading. Monthly air quality tests from 1970 to 1994. And what she found made her blood run cold. The air quality in Section C had never been within safe limits. Not once. Every single test showed elevated levels of benzene, formaldehyde, and trichloroethylene. All known carcinogens. All in amounts far exceeding OSHA standards. The company had been testing the air every month for 24 years. And every single test proved the factory was poisoning the workers. But that wasn't the worst part. Gloria kept reading. She found memos from the company's legal department. Discussing the cancer cluster. Discussing liability. Discussing how to handle it if workers started asking questions or filing complaints. One memo was dated 1973. 2 years before Gloria had gone to Robert Hayes. 2 years before she'd filed her OSHA complaint. Subject: Section C health concerns. Recommendation: continue operations. Cancer rates among workers are concerning but not yet legally actionable. Discontinuing use of current chemicals would cost approximately $2 million in equipment replacement and production delays. Recommendation is to continue current operations and settle individual claims as they arise. Estimated settlement costs significantly lower than replacement costs. Gloria read that memo 3 times. The company had known. Had known workers were getting cancer. Had known the chemicals were dangerous. Had known people would die. And they'd decided it was cheaper to let them die and pay settlements than to fix the problem. They'd killed 30 women to save $2 million. And Gloria had helped them. She'd stayed quiet when she should have screamed. She'd believed Robert Hayes when he told her there was no proof. But there was proof. There had always been proof. The company had just hidden it. And when Gloria filed her OSHA complaint, they'd cleaned up for the inspection and lied. And OSHA had believed them. Gloria sat on the floor of Robert Hayes's office and cried. 50 years of guilt. 50 years of what? And now she knew. She'd been right all along. The factory had been killing her coworkers. And she could have stopped it. If she'd been braver. If she'd pushed harder. If she'd refused to stay quiet. But she hadn't. She'd been scared. And 30 women paid the price. But now Gloria had proof. She had the air quality test. She had the memos. She had evidence that the company knew and chose profit over lives. And she was going to make sure everyone else knew too. Before we continue with what Gloria does with this evidence, I need you to understand something. This story is about workers who were expendable. Who were poisoned. Because saving them would cost too much. If you've ever worked in a place that valued profit over safety, hit that subscribe button right now. We tell the stories of people who were failed by their employers. By systems that protect companies instead of workers. Your subscription helps us continue. Now let's see what Gloria does next. Gloria gathered every document she could find. Air quality tests. Medical reports. Memos from the legal department. Correspondence with OSHA. She loaded it all into boxes and carried it to her car. Then she drove straight to a lawyer's office. A firm that specialized in worker compensation and corporate negligence. She walked in with her boxes and said, "I have proof that Riverside Textile Mill knowingly poisoned its workers for 24 years. I have 30 dead women. And I want justice." The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Gomez, listened to Gloria's story. Looked at the documents. And her eyes went wide. "This is incredible," Patricia said. "This is exactly what we need to prove corporate knowledge and willful negligence. But I have to ask, how did you get these documents?" Gloria told her the truth. "I broke into the abandoned factory and took them." Patricia nodded slowly. "That complicates things. These documents might not be admissible in court if they were obtained illegally. But they give us a roadmap. We know what to look for. We can subpoena the company's records. Force them to produce everything." Gloria's heart sank. "So what I found doesn't matter?" Patricia shook her head. "It matters. It matters tremendously. Because now we know the evidence exists. Before we were guessing. Now we know. And that changes everything." Patricia took Gloria's case. She filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of all the women who had worked in Section C and developed cancer. She sent subpoenas to Riverside Textile Company, now a subsidiary of a larger corporation. She demanded all safety records, air quality tests, memos and correspondence related to Section C from 1970 to 1994. The company fought it. They claimed the records had been destroyed when the factory closed. They claimed there was no evidence of wrongdoing. They claimed the cancer cases were coincidental. But Patricia pushed back. She had Gloria's testimony. She had the list of 30 dead women. She had medical records proving they'd all worked in the same section and all died of similar cancers. And she had enough details from the documents Gloria found to know exactly what to ask for in discovery. The judge ordered the company to produce all remaining records. And when they did, it was even worse than Gloria had imagined. The company had known since 1968 that the chemicals in Section C were dangerous. They'd commissioned a private study. The study recommended immediate ventilation upgrades and replacing several chemicals with safer alternatives. Estimated cost, $2.8 million. The company's response, defer upgrades. Current profit margin does not support this expense. Continue operations and monitor worker health. If cancer rates become problematic, reassess. They'd known for 26 years. Had a report that explicitly said these chemicals cause cancer. And they'd chosen to keep using them. Because upgrades were expensive. Because profit mattered more than lives. Patricia also discovered that the OSHA inspection in 1975 had been compromised. Robert Hayes had received advance warning that an inspector was coming. He'd shut down Section C for maintenance the day before. Had cleaned the entire factory. Had opened all the windows despite it being winter. The air samples OSHA took were from a factory that had been deliberately altered to pass inspection. And the inspector had never come back to do a surprise follow-up. Robert Hayes had died in 2010. But his notes were in the company files. Notes bragging about how he'd managed the OSHA inspection. How he'd scared Gloria into silence. How he'd kept production running without interruption despite the cancer cluster. He'd been rewarded for it. Promoted to regional manager. Given bonuses. The company had rewarded him for covering up the deaths of 30 women. The trial took 2 years. Gloria testified for 3 days. She told the story of every woman who had died. She read their names. She described watching them get sick. She admitted her own failure to speak up. Her own cowardice. Her own complicity. I knew something was wrong, Gloria said on the stand. I knew my friends were dying. And I stayed silent because I was scared of losing my job. I will regret that for the rest of my life. But the company, they didn't stay silent out of fear. They stayed silent because murder was cheaper than safety. And they need to be held accountable. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Guilty on all counts. Willful negligence. Corporate malfeasance. Wrongful death. The company was ordered to pay $250 million in damages. $150 million to the families of the 30 women who died. $100 million in punitive damages. It was one of the largest workplace safety verdicts in state history. But money didn't bring back the dead. Didn't undo 50 years of grief. Didn't erase Gloria's guilt. After the verdict, Gloria stood outside the courthouse and spoke to reporters. This isn't a victory, she said. 30 women are still dead. Their children still grew up without mothers. Their families still suffered. This is just acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that they mattered. That their lives had value. That the company was wrong to treat them as expendable. And I want every worker to know, if something feels wrong, speak up. Even if you're scared. Even if you might lose your job. Because staying silent can cost lives. And that's a price too high to pay. Gloria just won a massive verdict. But she's not celebrating. Because she knows 30 women are still dead. If this story is making you think about workplace safety, about speaking up, about the cost of silence, hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me about a time you spoke up or wish you had. And make sure you're subscribed, because Gloria's story isn't over. Stay with me to see what she does with her second chance. After the verdict, Gloria started hearing from other workers. Not just from Riverside Textile Mill. From other factories. Other industries. People who had been exposed to dangerous chemicals. Who had gotten sick. Who had watched coworkers die. Who had been too scared to speak up. Who carried the same guilt Gloria carried. They wanted to know how she'd found the courage to finally fight back. Gloria told them the truth. I didn't have courage for 50 years. I only found it when I had nothing left to lose. When everyone I'd been afraid of disappointing was gone. When the only person I had to answer to was myself. But you don't have to wait 50 years. You can speak up now. While there's still time to save people. Gloria started working with advocacy groups, worker safety organizations, union representatives. She told her story at conferences, to factories, at union halls. She became a voice for workers who felt powerless, who felt expendable, who felt like their safety didn't matter as much as productivity and profit. And slowly things started changing. Laws were strengthened. OSHA protocols were updated. Whistleblower protections were enhanced. Companies faced tougher penalties for safety violations. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. It was progress. And it was built on the graves of 30 women Gloria had known, had loved, had failed, and finally honored. But Gloria knew there were more factories like Riverside. More Section CS where workers were being poisoned. More companies making the same calculation, deciding that settlements were cheaper than safety. So Gloria did something radical. She used her share of the settlement money to start an organization. The Section C Project. A non-profit dedicated to investigating workplace chemical exposure. They hired former OSHA inspectors, industrial hygienists, lawyers, journalists, and they did what OSHA couldn't or wouldn't do. Surprise inspections, undercover investigations, chemical testing. They went into factories and warehouses and plants and tested the air, tested the water, tested the materials, and they published their findings. The Section C project found violations in 42 workplaces in the first 3 years. 42 places where workers were being exposed to dangerous chemicals. Where ventilation didn't meet standards. Where companies were cutting corners to save money. The project filed complaints, sued companies, went to the media, and saved lives. Workers who were being slowly poisoned got the protections they needed. Ventilation was upgraded. Chemicals were replaced. Safety protocols were implemented. And cancer clusters that might have killed dozens were prevented. Because Gloria finally did what she should have done 50 years ago. She refused to be quiet. Gloria also reached out to the families of the 30 women who had died. Some wanted nothing to do with her. They blamed her for not speaking up sooner. For letting their mothers and sisters and daughters die. Gloria understood. She didn't defend herself. She just listened. Let them be angry. Acknowledged their pain. And told them she was sorry. That she would carry the guilt of her silence forever. Some families forgave her. Some didn't. But all of them appreciated that she was finally fighting. That she was making sure their loved ones' deaths meant something. That she wasn't letting the company get away with it. That 30 women who had been treated as expendable were finally being treated as valuable. As worthy of justice. As human. One family in particular meant everything to Gloria. Maria Santos's daughter Carmen was 7 years old when her mother died of leukemia in 1977. She was 54 now. She reached out to Gloria after the trial. They met at a coffee shop. Carmen brought a photo of her mother. Young, beautiful, smiling in her work clothes. My mother loved that job, Carmen said. She was so proud to be a supervisor. She talked about you all the time. Said you were the best boss she ever had. Said you looked out for your workers. Gloria started crying. I didn't look out for her. I knew something was wrong and I stayed quiet. Your mother died because I was a coward. Carmen reached across the table and took Gloria's hand. You were young. You were scared. The company lied to you. Threatened you. You're not the villain here. The company is. But I need to know. Did my mother know? Did she know she was being poisoned? Gloria nodded slowly. Yes, he knew. We all knew something was wrong. We talked about it. We were scared. But we needed our jobs. We had kids to feed. We couldn't afford to make waves. Your mother wasn't a victim who didn't know what was happening. She was a woman who made the same calculation we all made. She weighed the risk and decided feeding her child was worth it. That's not weakness. That's love. And the company exploited that love to keep killing us. Carmen was quiet for a long time. Then she said thank you. For finally telling the truth. For finally fighting. My mother didn't get justice. But because of you, maybe the next generation of workers will. Gloria and Carmen stayed in touch. Carmen joined the board of the Section C project. She helped Gloria train new investigators. Together they made sure Maria Santos's death and the deaths of 29 other women became the foundation for something good. Something that protected workers instead of profits. Something that said human lives matter more than productivity. It wasn't redemption. Gloria would never be redeemed, But it was purpose. And purpose was enough to keep going. Gloria has turned 50 years of guilt into a movement that's saving lives. But she still carries the weight of those 30 women. If you believe workers deserve to be safe, if you've ever been afraid to speak up about dangerous conditions, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. We tell the stories that hold companies accountable. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Share this video. And stay with me because Gloria's fight is about to go national. 3 years after the Riverside verdict, Gloria was invited to testify before Congress. A committee was considering new workplace safety legislation, stronger chemical exposure limits, mandatory surprise inspections, criminal penalties for executives who knowingly expose workers to dangerous conditions. Gloria was asked to speak about her experience, to tell the story of Section C, to explain what happens when companies are allowed to value profit over safety. Gloria was 76 years old now. She'd spent the last 3 years fighting, but she was tired. The weight of 30 deaths, the guilt of 50 years of silence. It never got lighter. It never went away. But she agreed to testify, because if her story could change laws, could protect workers across the country, then maybe finally those 30 women would matter. Gloria sat in front of the congressional committee and told her story. Every detail. The chemical smell. The cancer cluster. Robert Hayes's threats. The OSHA inspection that found nothing because the company had cleaned up. Her decision to stay quiet. 50 years of guilt. And the documents she found that proved the company had known all along. She showed the committee the memos. The air quality tests. The cost-benefit analysis that decided murder was acceptable if it saved money. She read the names of all 30 women. Their ages. How many children they left behind. How long they'd worked at the factory before getting cancer. How long they'd suffered before dying. When Gloria finished, the room was silent. Then a congressman from Ohio spoke. Ms. Reyes, you've been very honest about your own failure to speak up. Some might say you're complicit in these deaths. How do you respond to that? Gloria looked him in the eye. I am complicit. I knew something was wrong and I stayed quiet. I chose my job security over my coworkers' lives. And I will carry that guilt until I die. But here's what I want you to understand. The company designed the system to make me complicit. They threatened my job. They lied about the air quality. They corrupted the OSHA inspection. They created an environment where speaking up was professional suicide. And they bet that poor women with kids to feed wouldn't risk it. They were right. We didn't. And that's how they got away with murder for 24 years. Another congresswoman from California asked, what do you think would have changed the outcome? What could have made you speak up? Gloria thought about that. Better whistleblower protections. If I'd known I couldn't be fired for reporting safety violations, I would have reported them. Surprise inspections. If OSHA had shown up unannounced, they would have found the violations. Criminal penalties. If executives faced jail time for exposing workers to toxins, they wouldn't have done it. And most importantly, believing workers. When I told my boss something was wrong, he dismissed me. When I filed an OSHA complaint, the inspector believed the company over the workers. If people in power had listened to us, 30 women would still be alive. The committee asked questions for 2 hours. About the chemicals. About the company's knowledge. About the lawsuit. About the Section C project. About what changes were needed. Gloria answered everything honestly. She didn't minimize her own failure. But she also didn't let the committee ignore the bigger systemic failures. The weak laws. The underfunded inspections. The lack of criminal accountability for executives. The assumption that workers were lying or exaggerating when they reported danger. All of it contributed. All of it needed to change. The testimony went viral. Clips were shared on social media. News outlets covered it extensively. Gloria became the face of worker safety reform. She gave interviews, wrote op-eds, spoke at rallies. Always with the same message. Workers are not expendable. Safety is not optional. Companies that poison their workers must face consequences. 6 months later, the Worker Protection Act passed. It included stronger chemical exposure limits, mandatory unannounced OSHA inspections, criminal penalties for executives who knowingly expose workers to dangerous conditions, enhanced whistleblower protections, and dedicated funding for worker safety enforcement. It wasn't perfect, But it was the strongest worker safety legislation in decades. And it was named after the 30 women who died at Riverside Textile Mill. The Maria Santos Worker Protection Act. Gloria was at the signing ceremony. She stood with Carmen and the other families. And when the president signed the bill, Gloria finally let herself feel something she hadn't felt in 50 years. Not forgiveness. Not redemption. But closure. The women's deaths finally meant something. Finally created change. Finally mattered. Gloria Reyes is 79 years old now. The abandoned Riverside Textile Mill was finally demolished last year. But before it was torn down, Gloria went back one more time. She walked through the factory floor. Past the machines. Past the workstations where her friends had died. She went to Section C, the place where 30 women had been poisoned. Where she'd spent 15 years breathing toxins. Where she'd made the choice to stay quiet. And she said goodbye. Goodbye to Maria. To Rosa. To Angela. To all of them. "I'm sorry I didn't fight for you," Gloria whispered to the empty room. "I'm sorry I chose safety over courage. But I promise you your deaths weren't for nothing. Because of you, workers across this country are safer. Because of you, companies can't poison people without consequences. Because of you I found my voice. And I'll keep using it until I can't anymore." The factory is gone now. In its place is a memorial park. The Maria Santos Memorial Garden. It has 30 trees. One for each woman who died. Their names are engraved on a monument at the center. And beneath the names, a quote from Gloria's congressional testimony: "Workers are not expendable. Every person who goes to work deserves to come home safely. Every life has value. Every death matters. We must do better." Gloria visits the memorial every week. She sits on a bench and talks to the trees. Tells them about the Section C project. About the factories they've shut down. About the workers they've protected. About the lives they've saved. She updates them on their children and grandchildren. Tells them they're remembered. They're honored. They mattered. The Section C project has investigated over 200 workplaces now. They've found violations in 87 of them. They've forced companies to upgrade ventilation. To replace dangerous chemicals. To implement safety protocols. They've prevented cancer clusters. Saved lives. And they're training the next generation of worker advocates. Young people who understand that safety is a right. That workers have power. That speaking up saves lives. Gloria trains them personally. She tells them her story. Not to absolve herself, but to teach them. To show them the cost of silence. To make sure they're braver than she was. Gloria has received awards. Recognition. She's been called a hero. A champion for workers. An inspiration. She rejects all of it. "I'm not a hero," she says every time. "Heroes speak up when it's hard. I stayed quiet for 50 years. I'm just a woman trying to make up for the worst mistake of her life. Trying to earn forgiveness I don't deserve. Trying to make 30 deaths mean something. That's not heroism. That's penance. But if her penance saves lives, she'll take it. She'll carry the guilt. She'll carry the weight. She'll carry the memory of 30 women who deserved better. And she'll make sure no other worker has to die because speaking up was too dangerous." Gloria Reyes returned to the factory where she worked 50 years ago. She broke in looking for answers. Looking for proof that she'd been right all along. That the company had been poisoning its workers. And she found it. Documents that proved 30 women died because executives decided murder was cheaper than safety. Evidence that had been hidden for decades. Truth that had been buried under rust and dust and corporate lies. And instead of keeping it to herself, instead of letting guilt consume her, Gloria fought back. She sued. She testified. She exposed the company. She changed laws. She built an organization that protects workers. And she made sure 30 women who died invisible deaths became visible. Became important. Became the foundation for change. Old woman returned to factory where she worked 50 years ago. Discovery there changed everything. That's the headline. But the real story is about a woman who made the worst choice of her life. Who stayed silent when she should have screamed. Who let fear control her for 50 years. And who finally found the courage to face what she'd done. Not to erase it. Not to be forgiven for it. But to transform it. To turn guilt into action. To turn failure into purpose. To turn 30 deaths into a movement that saves lives. It's not redemption. Gloria doesn't believe in redemption for what she did. But it's something. It's meaning. It's justice delayed but not denied. Gloria Reyes is 79 years old. She worked in a factory that poisoned her and killed her friends. She stayed silent when she should have spoken. He carries guilt that will never fade. But she spent the last 6 years making sure no other worker suffers the way her friends did. Making sure companies can't poison people without consequences. Making sure workers know they have power. That their voices matter. That speaking up saves lives. And every day she visits a memorial garden with 30 trees. And she tells 30 dead women that she's still fighting. Still speaking. Still making sure they matter. That's what it means to turn guilt into purpose. To live with the weight of failure and transform it into change. To accept that you can't undo the past but you can shape the future. To understand that redemption isn't about being forgiven. It's about making sure your mistakes become lessons. Your failures become catalysts. Your silence becomes a scream that echoes across decades and saves lives you'll never meet. Gloria Reyes will never forgive herself. But she doesn't need to. Because 30 women are finally being honored. And thousands of workers are safer because she refused to stay quiet anymore. Thank you for staying with me through Gloria's entire story. This one was about workplace safety. About companies that treat workers as expendable. About the cost of staying silent. About guilt that can either destroy you or drive you to create change. If this story made you think about your own workplace. About times you didn't speak up. About companies that put profit over safety. Then I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel right now. We tell the stories that hold corporations accountable. That demand justice for workers. That remind us all that human lives matter more than productivity. Like this video. Share it with anyone who works in manufacturing. Anyone in a union. Anyone who has ever felt unsafe at work and didn't know what to do. Leave a comment telling me about your own experiences. Have you worked somewhere dangerous? Did you speak up? What happened? Most importantly, if you're currently working somewhere you think is unsafe, report it. To OSHA. To your union. To the media. Don't wait 50 years like Gloria did. Don't let fear keep you silent. Your life matters. Your coworkers' lives matter. And companies need to be held accountable. Visit the Section C project website to learn more about workplace chemical exposure. Request an inspection if you're concerned about your workplace. Donate if you can to help them continue investigating factories and protecting workers. And remember, every safety regulation we have exists because someone died. Someone stayed silent. And then someone finally spoke up. Be the person who speaks up. Be the person who demands safety. Be the person who refuses to let workers be expendable. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, remember that the stories of those who suffer are the ones that change systems. That save lives. That remind us why worker safety isn't negotiable. It's a right. And Gloria Reyes spent 6 years proving that 30 women who were treated as expendable were actually invaluable. That their deaths mattered. That their lives mattered. And that no worker should ever have to choose between safety and survival. Because that's not a choice anyone should have to make. Rest in peace to the 30 women of Section C. Your names are carved in stone. Your trees grow strong. Your deaths changed everything. And Gloria Reyes will make sure you're never forgotten.